Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been looking at different ways to analyze a text, whether it be the Big Six that College Board puts out or the lenses that we've been looking at. Um, we spent a lot of time just talking about different ways we can attack and look at and analyze and discuss a text. Well, now this week, I'm going to show you how you're going to be asked to apply that knowledge on the actual AP exam. Now, we're just basically going to look at the three free response essays here. We're not going to write those essays today uh, or this week. Really just going to talk about how we can break down the prompt and from that craft a solid thesis and perhaps maybe a single body paragraph for our purposes this week. So, um, as you know, the test you're going to be asked to take in May has two sections. The first one is 55 question multiple choice. You get an hour, it's 45% of your exam. But we're not really worried about that. I'm going to focus here on the second part here, the free response. Free response questions are the three essay questions. You'll have 2 hours to complete that. That's over half a percentage total of your exam score. Uh, so that's what we're going to dial in on today. As we look at these, like I said, we're not going to be writing them this week. We will practice that in the future, doing complete essays, and we'll also do some timed ones as well to try to get in that sort of habit of what it's like to write an essay. Read a prompt, break it down, plan your writing, and execute the writing all in about 40 minutes. So that's something that we'll focus on as we move forward. This week, really just working on unpacking a prompt, breaking it down, and trying to do so in a fashion that is effective and beneficial to you. Let's start with the poetry prompt. Now, poetry, typically, what it will ask you is the following. It will ask you to analyze how language of the poem reflects the speaker's perceptions and how, in turn, that language determines the reader's perceptions. It might ask you to analyze how the poet reveals character, diction, sound devices, imagery, illusion, etc. It may also ask you to discuss how poetic elements such as language, structure, imagery, and point of view convey meaning. You could be asked to relate imagery, form, or theme of a particular section of a poem to another part of the same poem. So it's asking you to take one element and relate it to the overall poem itself. Or analyze an extended metaphor and how it reveals this poet's or the speaker's attitude. And the last thing might also ask you to consider how form affects meaning, right? So these are all things that when we get closer to the exam, we'll really dial in our focus on poetry, especially second semester, to make sure that for each one of these bullet points, we have strong talking points that we can go into the test with. So that's one of the types of essay. There's another essay, which is the prose passage prompt, and that's usually from a novel or a short story, but sometimes you'll see it from a drama, which is a play. Typically, here's what the prose will ask you. To analyze narrative and literary techniques that reveal character in some fashion. So you'll be looking at diction, syntax, point of view, imagery, illusion, other devices, and how they reveal character that's featured in the passage. Might ask you to explain the effect of the passage on the reader or analyze the attitude of the speaker. And we'll talk later about how we can separate the author from the speaker, right? Or the poet from the speaker, the author from the narrator. When are they the same? When are they different? Might also ask you to analyze the attitudes of the author using tone and style and be able to not only identify what is being done, but how it's being done, right? That's the big question. A lot of times I see students falter because they'll identify this is imagery, right? But they cannot explain how it was done or to what effect for the reader. The third type of essay that you'll see is the free response prompt. Basically, that's where they'll give you a prompt and you'll be asked to basically respond using a text that you've already read, something that's already in your arsenal. So it's a novel you read sometime either on your own or in school, and we'll really work on these two as well throughout the year to make sure we have a confidence going into this essay. But typically what they'll ask you to do is respond to a question based on specific insights, demonstrate your insights, critical thinking, and writing ability, show awareness of character and comprehension of theme. We talked how theme is very important at this point, and it doesn't, that doesn't shy away here. Usually, whatever you're talking about, you'll be tying back to theme. Transfer specific ideas and details to a universal concept. reveal the relationships among form, content, style, structure, and their effects on the meaning of the work as a whole. And you'll be asked to compose the well-organized essay written in a mature voice and sophisticated style. So make sure you know what part to whole and the meaning of the work as a whole mean, right? Basically, we're talking about theme. How does something help to develop a theme, or how does one aspect of a novel, like a character's contrast with other characters, play into that theme? And that's something that we'll really work on, not just on our timed essays, but in our general essays, literary analysis essays throughout the year. Feeling overwhelmed yet? Well, don't worry. Like I said, that's a lot of information to take in, but we're going to get to that, kind of break it down piece by piece throughout the entire school year, this semester and next. Today, I just want to focus on that thesis sentence and maybe a single body paragraph. The reason I want to talk to you about thesis is because under the new rubric that was introduced last year, College Board puts a lot of weight on a thesis statement. You can score up to 6 points in total, as you know. One of those points is just, do you have a thesis statement, right? And I think we know that you can respond with a thesis that presents a defensible interpretation of the poem. The things where people falter is where they A, just don't have one, or B, the intended thesis only restates the prompt. I get that a lot, and that's unfortunate because that's a point that you cannot get. So, for example, if someone says, if the prompt is, how does the author use contrasts to develop the character in this passage? And then you respond with, the author uses contrasts to develop character in this passage. You're not getting that point. Sorry, bud. So we'll talk about ways to avoid just simple restates of the prompt. One thing else I'd like to point out down here is that the thesis may be anywhere in the response to get the point. Now, generally, we like to tell people, make sure it's the last sentence in your introduction. And I say that because then it's easily identifiable for the grader. It's easy for you when you're organizing your ideas in the body of writing. You'll always have that to go back to make sure whatever you're writing in your body ties back to your thesis. But you can have it in your conclusion. In fact, I have seen that where students start writing, they don't really know what their thesis is, and they kind of work themselves into it by the time they get to the conclusion, and they make it like their clinching statement. And you could get the point for that. Generally, try to shy away from that, but just keep that in mind that it won't kill you if you're not in the introduction. So let's take a look at a short video here about writing an advanced literary thesis. Some ideas here that I think will resonate.
What's up, guys? It's Miss Peer Editor, and today I'm going to show you how to write an advanced literary thesis that is sure to impress. What's different about this thesis statement is that you're writing it specifically for a literary analysis essay, which means that you're focusing on a piece of text, whether it's a book, poem, play, or anything like that. So there are 3 essential elements that you need to use in order to cook up the perfect thesis statement. The first part is your what. So that's a pattern, observation, or device that you're focusing on specifically. That can be anything from a characteristic, an event, a device such as symbolism, personification, metaphor, anything along those lines. Your second part is your how. That's answering the question, what is the function of this device? What purpose does it serve in the text? And you're going to use really active verbs such as demonstrates, highlights, depicts, conveys. And your last part is your so what. That's pretty much all it says it is. It's just a theme that's specific to your piece of writing. This answers the question, why am I reading this book? Why is this text significant, and what universal theme does it convey? You can click on this link that I've provided that shows you a video on how to identify theme using an example from the movie Black Panther, which is pretty cool. So our first thesis is from the book To Kill a Mockingbird, one of my personal favorites, but you don't have to have read the book in order to understand the thesis. In To Kill a Mockingbird, Boo Radley's active heroism highlights the discrepancy between true character and society's perception of an individual. Our what is Boo Radley's act of heroism. So that's a symbolic event that I chose to focus on, and that refers to the part when Boo Radley saves Jem and Scout from Bob Ewell. Our how is the word highlights, and highlights means points out, brings attention to, sheds light on. Our so what is this last chunk of text, which conveys a universal theme that is depicted by the text and especially this event. And this theme conveys the fact that everyone in the town expects Boo Radley to be this horrifying ghost-like figure, but in reality, he's just a compassionate, kind, and caring individual who happens to save the day. Here's our second example thesis based on the novella Heart of Darkness. Kurtz's painting in Heart of Darkness depicts the company's callousness, proving that power breeds delusion and blinds oppressors to their misdeeds. So our what is Kurtz's paintings. That's a really important symbol in this book, and it's actually a painting of a blindfolded woman who's carrying a lit torch in the darkness. Our how is depicts the company's callousness. So that shows that the painting conveys the idea that the company, which is a group of white men harvesting ivory in the Congo, this company is really indifferent to the people living in the Congo, indifferent to their suffering. They don't really care about anything except making profit. And our so what is this last chunk of text, which pretty much sums up the theme that power corrupts and makes oppressors blind to the suffering that surrounds them. Here are 3 strategies you can use in order to come up with your thesis statement. The first one is to identify a pattern first, which means that as you're reading the text, note down some recurring observations or devices that you see, something that really sticks out to you. For example, if the author keeps using foreshadowing, you might want to note that down. And then after you've found your pattern, you can find a theme to match. Your second strategy is to choose a theme first and find a pattern or a device that supports that theme. So here you're working backwards. You're starting out with your universal theme statement, the significance of the book. And your third strategy, my personal favorite, is to create your own question and answer with a statement. So here are 3 sample questions that you could use. The first one is, why is Boo Radley?
Okay, guys, I'm going to pause it there because basically when we look at that, number 3 is essentially what you'll be asked to do with this type of writing on the timed essays. When College Board gives you the question, you answer it with a statement, right? So as we break down prompts, we're going to focus on thesis statements, and we're also going to focus on single body paragraphs. You're not going to be writing that whole essay, but I will ask you to draft a thesis and then tag in 1 extra body paragraph. One of the most basic approaches we like to use is called the meal plan, where you have your main idea, which is essentially your topic sentence, evidence, which is your text support, analysis of that evidence, personal examination, where you kind of give your thoughts on it, and then the link, which is sort of tagging it back to your thesis. And that's very important because if you'll look in the commentary part of your rubrics, and we'll be spending some time with this later in the year, when you look at that, you'll see that it is hard to score in the 3 or 4 out of 4 columns if you don't have a link back to your thesis. And if you don't have a thesis, you won't score up there. So you're kind of looking at the best you could possibly do is a 2 or 3 at best out of 6. So I have a sample here of a paragraph that uses the meal plan. Feel free to pause this video anytime you'd like. If you want to stop and read through that, you're more than welcome to do so. Okay, so after this video concludes, what I'd like you to do is take a look at my next video that kind of demonstrates breaking down a prompt, and then I'll ask you to do so throughout the exercises for this week. All right, thanks, guys.